Hermeticism, the ancient wisdom of Hermes Trismegistus, the lost path to your true self. What if the truth you've been searching for has always been hidden within you? This is not just a story about Hermes or ancient myths. It's a journey into the lost wisdom of Hermeticism, the teachings that once guided souls through shadow, silence, and awakening. In an age drowning in noise, distraction, and superficial spirituality, this video is your invitation to remember something sacred, not through belief, but through deep recognition. Stay with this till the end, not just to understand, but to feel what it means to live from your inner light. Hermes does not belong to any single faith. He exists as a living legend, an archetype, the awakened one, the eternal wanderer of the invisible realms, in pursuit of the light beyond appearances. From this image, a stream of knowledge emerged, called Hermeticism, an invitation to awaken souls to embark on an inward journey, to rediscover the true essence of the self. In today's chaotic world, Hermes is not merely a relic of the past, but a mirror reflecting the lonely souls seeking a way back to their being. He is the embodiment of timeless wisdom, the whispering voice within every consciousness. Look deeper, remember something sacred you've long forgotten. We do not merely learn about Hermes, we silently follow in his footsteps. And the question is no longer who is Hermes, but rather, is there a part of Hermes still alive within us, still calling us home? According to legend, Hermes Trismegistus was the author of the Emerald Tablet, inscribed with the famous axiom, "As above, so below." This is not merely the principle of astrology, alchemy, or mysticism. It is the key to understanding the structure of both the cosmos and the self. What occurs within consciousness is reflected outward in the world, and likewise, the universe is a mirror for the soul to see itself. Yet Hermeticism never developed into an institutionalized religion. It spread quietly through esoteric texts, known as the Corpus Hermeticum, a collection of ancient manuscripts presented as dialogues between master and disciple. These writings were not designed to argue right from wrong, but to awaken a dormant kind of wisdom within the reader's soul, a kind of knowing known as gnosis. According to ancient historians like Manetho, over 36,000 texts were once attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a vast treasury of ancient knowledge on the soul, cosmos, medicine, magic, alchemy, and healing. Most of these have been lost, surviving only as fragments, lightning flashes from a distant past. Yet despite their loss, the Hermetic legacy has never truly vanished. It waits for those who are ready not to be read with the eyes, but with consciousness. For Hermeticism is not conveyed through intellect, but through deep resonance, where knowing is no longer information, but awakening. At the same time, the Church rejected the idea that pagan sages could have foretold Christ. With the rise of modern science demanding proof, laws, and experimentation, Hermeticism was pushed into obscurity, dismissed as outdated mysticism. From a tradition once scorned as illusion, Hermeticism silently revived not as a religion, but as an inward calling. It waits not for belief, but for those ready to turn within, to ask, has what we now call progress truly brought us closer to truth? Or have we only strayed farther from the light? Our ancestors once held the light that once blazed in Hermes' wisdom, and now lingers only in the dreams of the awakened? Gnosis and nous, the doorway to awakening beyond ordinary reason. Not all knowledge comes from reading, listening, or analysis. There is another kind of understanding, silent, radiant, and beyond names, what the ancients called gnosis, and to access it, Hermeticism offers a special key, nous, divine intelligence, not logical reasoning, but an inner light capable of piercing through reality. In the Corpus Hermeticum, Hermes does not merely converse with his disciples. He once directly encountered Poimandres, the embodiment of nous, during an expanded state of consciousness, not with physical eyes, but with the eye of the soul. Hermes beheld infinite light in that moment. There was no distinction between subject and object. He became the light, and the light was him. This is the essence of gnosis, not knowing about something, but becoming that very thing. It cannot be conveyed in words or formulas. It only occurs when consciousness touches a different level, where the ego dissolves and our perception of reality is reborn. Nous, in Hermetic tradition, is not mind in the modern sense. It is closer to deep intuition, mystical insight, or what Carl Jung might call a transformative archetypal experience. Like light, you cannot grasp it, but you know unmistakably when you are standing in it. What's fascinating is that Hermeticism does not reject reason, but it insists reason is merely the threshold. True awakening comes from nous. When the heart and soul open in sacred stillness, gnosis is the destination, but nous is the path, not through trying to understand more, but through surrendering what clouds the inner light. Thus, Hermeticism does not teach us to learn in the ordinary sense. It invites us to remember what the soul already holds, something that, when heard, needs no explanation, just a silent knowing. Yes, I have always known this. The soul's descent is not a punishment, but an opportunity. Only through fragmentation does one begin to seek wholeness again. Yet in that process, the soul becomes surrounded by 12 dark forces, destructive energies within the psyche: desire, anger, deceit, envy, greed, betrayal. All that keeps a person unconscious and looping through spiritual suffering lies there. Hermes teaches that true death is not the decay of the body, but when the soul becomes so veiled in darkness that it no longer remembers who it is. People live in death while still alive, entranced by matter, desire, and the illusion of ego. The greatest tragedy is this: many are capable of entering immortality, but choose to remain in the cycle of suffering simply because they have no idea what lies beyond it. But not all souls remain lost. For those who dare to look inward, to question what is true in a world of illusions, the light begins to return when they realize that destructive emotions do not arise from the outside, but from within. When they begin to see that their pain is rooted in something deeper than surface stories, the healing journey begins. Such a soul, according to Hermeticism, need not wait for physical death to be liberated. It can be reborn while still alive. And at that point, the person is no longer a victim of fate, but one who walks in the light with a restored heart and eyes that have seen beyond this world, not escaping the world, but bringing the divine into it. Many, upon hearing the words spirituality or enlightenment, associate them with renunciation, a kind of withdrawal from the mundane world. But Hermeticism offers a different, deeper view. The purpose of the soul is not to escape the world, but to transform it with inner light, not to flee life, but to live within it, consciously. Unlike the dualism of Gnosticism, which sees matter as a prison created by a dark force, the demiurge, Hermeticism affirms that this world is not evil, it simply has yet to be illuminated by divine awareness. The universe is not a mistake, but a reflection of the divine, and humans, once they realize their true nature, can embody truth, beauty, and goodness in every small act of daily life. Hermes did not teach his students to run from the world. He said, "Man is the image of God, not merely through his capacity to think, but through his capacity to bring the divine into the world." When we face suffering with compassion, when we translate knowledge into kind action, when we plant a seed of light in a dark place, that is when the universe is healed. In Hermeticism, the idea of mastering the world has nothing to do with power or control, but with communion with life itself. With each plant, drop of water, or glance from a stranger, greatness arises not from separation, but from integration without assimilation. The Hermeticist does not seek heaven elsewhere, if heaven exists. It is in the moment we look at the world through the eye of nous, seeing all things not as things, but as manifestations of the One. When the sacred is lived through each breath, life ceases to be a burden and becomes a ritual. Thus, the path is not in rejecting the world, but in awakening within it, quietly transforming the world into a part of the light the soul once lost. The lowest realm is the material world, where time, space, desire, and fear dominate. Here, the soul is swept into cycles of emotion and instinct, living as though severed from the primordial light. But above this lie the 7 planetary spheres corresponding to the 7 ancient planets: Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, each representing a layer of consciousness that must be transcended. Beyond the planets lies the 8th sphere, the Ogdoad, where the purified soul, having shed the ego's bindings, begins to feel its origin again. Above that is the Ennead, the 9th sphere, representing the essence of Nu, the light of sacred knowledge, pure intuition, no longer limited by logic or boundaries. And finally, the 10th sphere, the nameless, formless God, beyond all images and concepts. This is not a destination as a place, but a state of absolute union where individuality dissolves and becomes an indivisible part of the whole. This realm belongs neither to time nor space. It exists in stillness in the moment the soul realizes, "It is the light that seeks me, not I who seek the light." And in that total surrender, the extraordinary occurs. The human no longer sees the universe as something outside, but realizes they are the universe itself, a point of contact between eternity and existence. Understanding this tenfold structure changes the way we view life. Each sorrow is a realm to be crossed, each emotion a test, and each time we choose light over instinct, we ascend one more step on the ladder back to our source. Sacred transmission. When knowledge is passed from teacher to student, Hermeticism was never designed as a public doctrine for mass teaching. It is transmitted in silence, through symbols and inner experience, via dialogues between teacher and student, not to deliver answers, but to unlock doors long closed within the soul. Knowledge in Hermeticism cannot be imposed. It can only be awakened like embers long asleep. Stirred by the right breeze, the Hermetic teacher does not teach, but activates the soul's memory in the student, causing them to remember what they have always known but forgotten in the noise of life. Thus, a key aspect of Hermetic transmission is inner resonance. Hermes once said, "The listener must align their soul and spirit with the speaker. They must hear faster than the words are spoken." This is no metaphor. It is truth. Knowledge is not transmitted through language, but through wavelengths of consciousness, and only those attuned to the right frequency can receive it. In its rush to systematize knowledge, the modern world has forgotten the power of this sacred transmission. But Hermeticism never disappeared. It simply hides in chance encounters, in a book someone gives you, in a whisper that touches the most silent longing in your heart. For true wisdom is not found, it is stirred from within, and sometimes a single glance, a single question, or a moment of silence can change a life forever. That is how Hermes still teaches to this day, not through lecture halls, but through souls ready to remember themselves. Hermes once said that when Hermetic texts were translated into Greek, much of their original spirit was lost, not merely due to language differences, but because Greek words, in his view, were games of hollow sound, lacking the sacred resonance embedded in the Egyptian originals. Each syllable in the original tongue carried energy, divinity, and vibration, not merely sound. This serves as a reminder for today's seekers. Do not be deceived by beautiful language or systems of logical concepts. Sometimes, the more we read, the more we listen, the more we learn, the farther we drift from real, lived experience. For truth is not found in definitions. It reveals itself in moments beyond the grasp of reason, in a gaze, in presence, in that sudden feeling when your heart touches something too sacred to name. Language, when used rightly, is light, but when we become dependent on it, it becomes a wall, separating us from the sacred. Read. And that is why Hermetic texts were never meant to explain, but to evoke, not to define truth, but to lead you back to the place where you can touch it yourself, in silence. The ultimate truth, when one realizes they are a part of God since the beginning of time, humanity has looked toward the heavens in search of God, a supreme, invisible being beyond all things. But in Hermeticism, truth is presented as a startling paradox. God is not far away, God is within you. And more profoundly, you are not just made in the image of God, you are a part of God. Hermes wrote, "Man is the grandchild of God, the world is the child of God, and all things are connected in a sacred circle." This is not a metaphor, it is an awakening. When we strip away the layers of flesh, desire, and illusion, what remains is not emptiness, but light. And that light is the essence of the divine. Hermeticism declares that this universe is not the product of a separate intellect, but of the sacred imagination of God. Everything exists because God is thinking of it. Just as you exist, not because you willed yourself into being, but because you are being dreamed by a consciousness far greater than anything ever conceived. And if we exist in the mind of God, then every action, emotion, and thought we have is part of the cosmic creative process. Humanity is no longer passive, no longer a victim of fate, but a co-creator with the eternal. But not everyone lives this truth. Many walk as though abandoned in this world. They believe God is distant, and they are dust. They suffer, because they forget what Hermes repeats again and again. If you know you are light, you will return to life. But if you see only your body, you will walk in darkness. And this is Hermeticism's ultimate truth. There is no need to search for God. God has never left you. You are part of Him. And you need not die to return. You need only awaken. The moment you see the light within yourself, not a physical light, but a deep inner knowing that you have always belonged to something greater, that is the moment you begin to live as a God clothed in human form. Yet Hermes does not leave us in despair. His teachings speak of 10 powers of light divine virtues that, when awakened from within, naturally dispel the darkness. No force is needed. No suppression. Darkness cannot remain where light is present. The healing journey does not begin by escaping negative emotions, but by facing them with silence and compassion. When one awakens true joy, self-mastery, steadfastness, justice, generosity, sincerity, and sacred love, then the dark forces begin to retreat, not because one has conquered them, but because they no longer find a place to cling. Hermes teaches, when truth appears, falsehood disappears. When light enters, darkness has no refuge. This is not merely sacred poetry. It is the operating law of the soul. The more one nurtures the qualities of light, the more one lives in alignment with their divine nature. Hermetic healing is not about escaping pain, but about transforming it into the very substance of growth. When you no longer avoid your inner truth, but face it with courage and awareness, you will see darkness does not need to be destroyed. It only needs to be seen. And once you see it clearly, you are no longer its victim. You are its master, not the master of the world, but the master of yourself. That is the first step toward becoming a free soul, knowing that no external force can control you if the light within you has been awakened. Knowing yourself is the beginning, but knowing others is the deeper awakening. Hermeticism always begins with the inward journey. Every Hermetic text emphasizes, to know God, one must first know oneself. But there is something many beginners overlook. Self-knowledge is not enough. True growth begins when we start seeing others through the eye of news. In a state of expanded consciousness, Tat Hermes' close disciple once exclaimed, "I no longer see with these eyes, but with the spiritual energy that now flows through me." In that moment, he not only saw himself, but felt himself everywhere in the earth, the water, the plants, and in the people around him. That sensation did not come from thought, but from deep unity with all things. Hermeticism does not separate the individual from the collective. It does not exalt personal enlightenment above compassion. On the contrary, once a person truly begins to heal, they cannot help but feel the wounds in others, not to judge but to understand. Hermes once said, "There is no soul that is wholly evil. Every wound is a crack through which the light enters." When you understand how lost you once were, what made you angry, what caused you to envy, you stop expecting others to be perfect. You begin to see that every soul is on its own journey, and each is passing through their own shadow. This is the moment when understanding becomes compassion. It is no longer an intellectual process, but a state of presence filled with loving kindness. And in that state, you realize a simple but profound truth. Every time you stop reacting, stop judging, stop trying to prove yourself, is a moment when the light of new spreads into the world. Because inner awakening does not end in private silence. It spills over into every conversation, every act of forgiveness, every time you choose to see another as a soul, not just a personality. And in that moment, you no longer merely know yourself. You begin to know life with a kind of knowing that needs no explanation. During Tat's initiation, Hermes did not teach him to argue or to resist. Instead, he taught Tat how to observe the impulses that rise from within without being pulled by them. He passed on the ability to see without reacting, feel without being swept away. This is true strength, not in controlling others, but in not allowing others to control your response. Hermeticism compares human consciousness to a body of water When agitated by anger, envy, or pain, that water becomes cloudy, unable to reflect the light. But when we learn to sit with ourselves, when we stop resisting rising emotions, our inner water becomes clear, and only then can the light of Nu's divine intelligence reflect itself fully. In a tense exchange, people often think silence is weakness, but Hermes taught the opposite. Only those with true inner strength have the capacity to maintain meaningful silence. For it is not avoidance, but a deliberate refusal to be led by base instinct. And this is the key. Every time you choose not to react out of habit, you don't just maintain peace, you break a hidden karmic cycle. You stop hurt from birthing more hurt. You prevent the darkness in others from awakening the darkness in you. You become the one who pauses in the whirlwind, guarding the candle that still burns. In this world, anyone can raise their voice, but only the awakened can choose silence and let that silence speak for them. That is the power Hermes left behind, and it is the gift that every Hermetic practitioner gives themselves each time they choose light over reaction. Truth does not lie in philosophy, but in the way you live your spirituality. Hermeticism is not a system of ideas to be memorized, nor a doctrine to be debated. It is a way of living, where knowledge no longer resides in the mind, but flows through every action, every breath, every moment you choose to live from your awakened spirit, not from your conditioned ego. In the final passages of the Hermetic texts, Hermes does not ask his students to believe in what he says. On the contrary, he emphasizes, truth cannot be spoken, cannot be written, cannot be transmitted by any means. It can only be lived. And that is the final message, which is also the beginning of the real journey. Hermeticism does not call you to abandon everyday life. It does not ask you to become a hermit or reject the material world. Instead, it asks, how are you living each day? Are you reacting, or are you present? Are you remembering the light, or continuing to forget yourself in the rush of illusions? Hermetic awakening does not arrive through lofty theories. It appears in quiet choices, when you forgive instead of retaliate, when you remain silent instead of speaking just to be heard, when you look at someone in pain without judging, when you believe something sacred lives in you, even when the world denies it. The truth Hermes speaks of does not need to be proven, because it can only be experienced, and those who walk that path begin to live differently, naturally. They do not claim to be enlightened. They do not need to explain themselves. They quietly radiate a presence that makes others feel something deeply real and deeply at peace. And if you've stayed with this journey to its final part, perhaps you too feel that presence stirring within. No need for answers, no need for certainty, just a silent recognition. I have known this before, and now I only need to remember. For the truth does not lie outside of you. It lives in how you choose to live each day, and that is where Hermeticism truly begins.